Thank you, everybody, for coming. Our AM 101 today is dealing with difficult leadership, and we will have this recorded. I understand a lot of you have board meetings this morning and whatnot, so we will be recording it and archiving it on our YouTube channel. And everyone who registered will get a follow-up email from me with a link to that recording. And with that, I did want to introduce our speaker. Her name is Carol Marzouk. She is known as the Executive Lion Tamer, and she is here to help us deal with difficult leadership. Thanks, Carol. Go right ahead.
Thank you, love. Thank you, Peggy. And good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see all your beautiful faces. I mean that. You're all really beautiful, very colorful also. All right, so let me ask you a question. How often do you have to deal with difficult people? And by the way, if you don't have background noise, feel free to unmute. Feel free to jot something down on the chat. This is not the Carol show. This is our discussion. So talk to me. How often do you have to deal with people that are toxic or difficult?
Every day.
Every day. And maybe several times a day?
It's a way of life.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And, you know, Elizabeth, the challenging thing is that now with COVID happening and the workplace shifting and this misalignment in many areas and insecurities rising in leaders that used to be able to see people in person, we're seeing a lot more of that. And we're seeing a lot more of that on boards of directors. We're seeing a lot more on executive teams. So let's talk about what toxic looks like and tell me if I've missed anything. But this is just to level set all of us, what we're talking about when we say disengaged or toxic. First of all, there are 4 levels of engagement. The 4 levels are very easy. It's engaged and disengaged. And then on the 2 spectrums, we've got completely actively disengaged, which is toxic. And then we've got on the opposite end of the spectrum, actively engaged. Now, engaged is very easy. What is engaged? What is engaged to you? When boards of directors are engaged, when executives are engaged, when your people are engaged, what does that look like? Responsive. What else?
Yeah, but I think it's tricky because I think coming from our perspective, engaged would be them understanding and knowing what's going on in the association. And for them, being engaged is just speaking up on whatever their perspective is.
Excellent. And you make, yes, it's very different. And you make another point that's very important. So not only by groups and by roles do we have to understand what engaged is, we also have to understand people's baselines. So for me, engaged might look like delivering everything on time, smiling when I come in, saying hi to people. For another person, their baseline might be just honing down, not talking much, very introspective, and that's their engaged. So Elizabeth, what you talk about is very important because we have to know our audience. And apart from the teams, we have to know the people in the teams. So yes, and engaged typically looks like they're doing what you expect them to do. And sometimes they're even knocking it out of the park, and whatever that means to you. Disengaged then is what? What does disengaged look like?
Anybody, you can just unmute.
Yes, please. Talk to me.
No communication.
No communication. And Sharon, you were saying?
Disconnected.
Disconnected, right? Sometimes you think about disengaged. If you've ever met somebody, you've gone to a store and you see them kind of just like they just punched in and they're gonna punch out. It's almost like they left their soul in bed, but brought their physical body to work, and they're just like walking zombies, right? And they're hoping you don't ask them for help. Those are the disengaged folks. They're literally there physically, but they're not really there. And they're watching the clock, or they just want the day to be over. When we're talking about boards, We're talking about the people that just come for the Chinese food, right? When we're talking about, or like seconding motions, when we're talking about executives or the leadership team, we're talking about people that are so in their world that they are not even aware of their impact. And they're just going through the motion, and they believe that motion equals impact, and that that's all they have to do. So that's what disengaged is. Now, if we look at actively engaged is going above and beyond all the time. It's like it's your association, it's your business, it's your organization, even though you're not at the helm, but you're always thinking innovatively. You're always thinking about taking it to the next level. How do we get more members? How do we do this? How do we do that? And you're, even though you're not up here, maybe you're here, you're thinking like somebody that's up here. That is actively engaged. These folks get very, they like growth. And so they're flight risks. So you've got to keep your eye on those folks too. And then let's talk about the toxic folks. The toxic folks, these are the ones that are taking it to the next level. They're literally damaging the workplace. They're damaging people in their interactions. They're verbal, they're vocal, they're visual, all of that goes into an interaction. It's all toxic or it's misaligned. So like they'll say something like, hey, Nicholas, I really care about you. And their face doesn't match what they say. And so it creates a lot of distrust. So let's talk a little bit more about what actual, like how it shows up in the workplace, this toxicity, this disengagement, right? When we're talking about that, we're also talking about micromanagement. A lot of times, look, micromanagers are simply insecure. They're insecure. They're insecure with the amount of things that need to get done. They're insecure with the level at which it needs to get done. They're insecure with their own abilities. And so what happens is that they literally pour that insecurity onto everybody else. And it looks like a whole bunch of different things. So I'm going to talk about what it looks like. Okay. So when they can't help, when they can't help themselves and they have to interject in everything that you do, no matter how great your track record is, that's probably a micromanager that's very insecure. And the reason why I'm telling you about this insecurity is partly also the reason why people always ask me, how do you work with toxic people? How is that your sweet spot? And I have to tell you, these people are wonderful people. They are good people, but they're getting in their own way because of that insecurity. So I'm telling you this so that you have a little bit of compassion for them, because they don't have that kindness, that lovingness, that care, that security, that confidence to pour into your cup. And if they don't have it, how can they give it to you? So let's have a little bit of compassion, but also let's not put ourselves in harm's way, because we only have this one body, right? The other things that it looks like is being allergic to being wrong. I don't know if you know people like that, but they always have to be right? They gloss over their own errors. They love to call people out on when they do things that are not right. But when it's about them, they're almighty, they're infallible. The interesting thing about these people is that they're really fun at parties. The next one is looking out for number one. They're really interested in just themselves and in making themselves look good. The next one is the people that want to surround themselves with yes people, with like minions that are just going to say yes, 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 right? So we're talking about no diversity of thought, no diversity of culture. It's just basically, if you have any type of constructive criticism or ideas, keep them to yourself, because I see it as an attack on myself, on me, on my leadership, on my person. So I don't want to hear your ideas. So that's another way that you can distinguish somebody as being toxic versus someone that isn't. The autocracy also is something that is very toxic, right? So this is people that really want to maintain that tight control, and they're intolerant of mistakes. And so much so that they don't trust. So therefore they don't delegate. And what happens is that we start to see the organizational efficiency and productivity go down because they're unable to do that. Again, they're getting in their own way. The first step to this is obviously self-awareness, right? The next piece, I don't know if any of you have encountered narcissists. So I have to tell you something that's not very popular. Most of us, if not all of us, have a little tiny bit of narcissistic qualities in us. That's not a problem. The problem is when you have an exaggerated sense of importance, so much so that you have a lack of empathy and that your need for admiration is grander than the team's success. That's when it's so toxic and when it's all about you, right? Manipulative, intimidating. That's another one. Overly competitive. This one I see a lot in people that are really high achievers. They want to win at the cost of anything. And what happens is that when I interview them, what I hear them say is, I have high standards. I'm inspiring. But the truth is, if you do a 360, if you start to really pay attention to the environment and what's going on around them, they're creating learned helplessness. And they're creating this sense of, we can only win if we're unethical, because we have to win at all costs. Now, learned helplessness. Does anybody know what learned helplessness is? This is what happens when you have toxic leaders down below. What do you think learned helplessness is? Take a guess. You can't be wrong. It's just me. Or put it in the chat. Anyone? Bueller? Yeah.
When they've been successful at doing something, then they learn that that's then they can get what they want.
Yes, Kim, thank you. So yes, that is part of that. Absolutely. Thank you. And to illustrate learned helplessness, just to bring it into a visual for you. Do you all know what happens with elephants in the circus? So these elephants, these poor little guys, right? In order to make them comply, what happens is, you've seen this, they go around in a circle and their ankle is attached to a metal cuff, which is attached to a pole. And there's a whole bunch of elephants, right? So they put this new elephant into that cuff and they want it to start just moving along with the other elephants, just follow the other elephants. Well, what do you think that elephant is first going to do when they're first put in the cuff? They're going to want to get out, right? They just try, like, their ankle moves and they try to get out of there, and then they start hurting. They start being in pain, and they realize, if I keep doing this, I'm going to hurt myself even more. I'm already hurting myself. So there's a point, there's that tipping point when that elephant is just like, you know what? I'm helpless. I'm just going to go ahead and do what they asked me to do. And if there's any thought, any idea, anything that comes into their mind, I'm not going to say anything, right? Because I'm expected to do this. And if I don't do this, I will experience some sort of pain, some sort of frustration. And so this happens. Now, after a while, let's say we take that cuff off of the elephant. What do you think happens? They stay. They have learned to be helpless. And this is what many toxic leaders do. It's not like they wake up every day and they're like, oh, I'm going to make everyone, helpless. But because they're control freaks, right? They're prone to hostility. You have to walk on eggshells. what happens is that we can't use our innate creativity anymore. We're afraid to do that. And so we end up in a learned helplessness state with distress and despair. And they often dismiss it. They often don't even notice it. There's other types of toxicity. What about the opposite of micromanaging? The boss or the board that is non-existent. There's no guidance, no information. Literally, you interact with voicemail to voicemail, and you're lucky if you get a response. It's like they've abdicated, right? Then you've got the pushover. We've got boards that are pushovers as a whole board, where they literally will say yes to everything. And so nothing ever gets done. Nobody meets their goals. There are no boundaries, no guidelines, nothing. So that's not good. And then we have the opposite. Then we have the people that are sticklers with rules, no flexibility, no gray areas, zero common sense, right? These are the rules. We've got to stick to the regulations. We've got to stick to the rules, even though it doesn't make any sense. I don't know if you've heard of that story with the pot roast. And I'm sure there are different variations of the story, but it's this little girl on Thanksgiving, and she goes up to her mom and she says, Mom, she's like 5 or 6. And she says, Mom, why do you always cut the ends off of the pot roast? And the mom says, I never really thought about that. Why don't you ask your grandmother who's sitting over there in the living room? And so the little girl with her curiosity, right? With her curiosity goes and she asks her grandmother, Grandma, why does Mom always cut the ends off of the pot roast? And the grandmother sits there and she goes, in all of my years, I have never thought about that, but my mom, your great grandma, is right there next to me. Go ask her. So she goes and asks her, and the great grandmother says, well, honey, during the war, we didn't have pots that were big enough to hold the whole pot roast. And so we cut off the ends. And so there it is. It goes into the family SOP. And then everybody cuts the ends off of the pot roast. And now we don't need to. Pot roast ends are the best, Leon. You're right. Right? We don't need to, but we continue doing it. And we do this in the workplace. We do this with boards of directors. It's because we've always done it. Not okay. Then we've got the gossip gatherer. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what's going on. And they're your boss. And the gossip giver. Right? They could be one and the same. Many times they are. Very toxic. What I want you to remember is that none of this can exist without the right environment. And who is that right environment? We are. We are the ones that are enabling this, believe it or not, because what they bring to the table might be manipulative, it might be narcissistic, it might be autocratic, it might be discriminatory, it could be a whole bunch of things, right? But if there's nowhere for them to thrive, yeah, Gerard, if there's nowhere for them to thrive, then it can't grow. It can't be there. It can't exist. So what does the conducive environment look like? What are we doing that we need to think about and pause and stop doing? So part of that conducive environment for them is feeling threatened. Feeling that there is a threat there that is not there. So what I hear from people that work with toxic leaders many times is, it's my job. I know he's going to let me go. I know I'm going to lose my job. Even volunteers, I hear, but I want to work here. I want to keep work. There's a perceived threat. And even though that threat isn't real, we're allowing that behavior to become a threat in our minds. And we fail to realize how much we've actually succeeded by the time we get to this job. And we forget to realize how resourceful we really are. And so we allow this threat to then become this fear in us. And it just keeps going. And so we give in and we give in and we give in. Another thing is, on the outside, we have these wonderful values. We have this wonderful mission and this vision that's amazing, right? Enron's values: communication, respect, integrity. So the hell what, right? Those are words on paper. So when you have leaders, and everyone should be a leader in the organization, in the association, when you have leaders that have values on paper, but they're acting completely differently, that is the kind of toxicity that allows for this conducive environment, and we don't question it. So that's why I'm bringing that up, because in a toxic environment, we don't question that this person is not acting and behaving in accordance with those values and standards that we have set forth. We're just like, oh, I guess they're immune. And the other piece of it is the absence of governance. We don't have any governance, and that allows, again, the toxicity to thrive, right? The other big piece that I want to talk about is having followers that are, what should I say? They're people pleasers to a fault, right? So they need that sense of belonging so much, which, by the way, is a need we all have. It's a primary need. It's that need for, to belong, and that low confidence and that need for self-preservation that disallows us from saying, hey, what's going on? Let's talk. So we are part of the problem. Now, the other piece of it is the trust, right? What's at the very foundation of every relationship and every team? It's trust. And in order to create that trust, there are 4 very distinct ingredients. And those ingredients, it's almost like an equation. Those ingredients are credibility. And this is, how much do you really know about your job, the actual job, right? Are you credible? Should I follow you? Should I listen to you and pay attention to what you have to say? The second one is reliability. If I make you a promise, am I going to deliver on that promise? Or am I just going to tell you, I'm going to dangle this carrot, and so that you can keep working harder and harder and harder and harder, but that is never going to come to fruition. So that piece of it, that reliability, is what destroys trust a lot. Then the next piece, some people call it intimacy. I call it confidentiality. It's the ability to hold somebody's confidence, right? So if I'm struggling with something in my life or at work, and I come to you and I share that with you, and tomorrow somebody says, oh, I heard that this was happening, it's over. That trust is gone, right? So those 3 things are very, very, very important. Can I trust you to keep something confidential? The last piece, which I would say is kind of the denominator of the formula, is the self-orientation. So when we're interacting with people, do they feel, I don't care how touchy-feely you are or how touchy-feely you're not, but it's like Maya Angelou always said, right? People don't remember what you did, but they remember how you made them feel. This piece, this denominator, is, are they able to feel that you've got their back? Are they able to feel that you truly, truly care about them and their best interests? Or do they question that? Do they question if you're doing things just to suit yourself? So that piece, that self-orientation, is huge. So all of those things go towards trust. If we don't have those things, it's over. There's no trust. So let me ask you all now, have you been successful at taming some lions? Toxic bosses, toxic colleagues, toxic boards, toxic volunteers, toxic people, toxic relationships in your life. Have any of you been successful in taming them? And what have you done?
I know this is not a shy group. Come on, somebody.
What have you done? You encounter them every day. What do you do?
Pride.
Did
I
you
think you
cry?
have to have honest discussions. I think you have to be willing to have that one-on-one honesty with somebody that you may be encountering that has those types of issues, whether it's leadership or a staff member as well. And I think you need to do it in such a way that it's not a personal confrontation, but you're pointing these traits out, and you're pointing out, as you say, the ingredients that go into establishing trust.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Sharon. It's imperative. And that's the thing that keeps us down and keeps them here being toxic, is that we're not having those conversations because we're living in fear and doubt. We're not living in a place of trust and respect for ourselves. And so we allow this to happen and we're like, no, not having that conversation, right? So we can always have those tough conversations. It's just how you do it. I'm going to share with you one of the reasons why I do what I do. One of the reasons is because when I was in corporate, I had a boss. I had two that were unbelievable. Like, one of them, I'm 5'2", and I'm 5'4" on a good day. I have been 5'4" once in my life. I measured 5'4", never happened again. But I'm really short. And this guy was, I don't know, upwards of 6'4". Right, with a really heavy accent, a really heavy Irish accent. And I just remember it. He always towered over me. And if I was taking my leadership groups to France, to China, to Colorado, to anywhere, he would show up because he'd know my where I am. And he would always come to me right before I'm about to get on stage to talk with the board, or right before I'm about to talk with the leaders. And he would always say things like, "You have zero value. I don't know why you're in this organization. I don't know why the CEO wants you to work with his team. It should be me working with them. You bring nothing. You're nothing." He has said, "You are nothing. You are valueless," right? And imagine me telling all these leaders, right, taking them to all these parts of the world to teach them global leadership and how you should stand up and how you should manage your manager and, all this stuff. And I'm here taking this. For 2 years, I didn't say anything. And I felt like a fraud because here I am telling all these people what to do or how to do it. And I'm just sitting back. Well, after the 2 years that I've suppressed this, I started getting really ill. And every time I saw his name or heard his voice or heard any accent like that, I'm over it, by the way, if anyone's Irish. Anytime, I would literally have to run to the bathroom and throw up. And within the last 2 weeks, I lost 15 pounds. And it was not pretty at all. And so imagine that. So I thought, okay, well, what would I tell my leaders to do? So what I did was, every time he did that, I would just look up at him and say, "Now tell me 3 good things. 3 good things that I'm doing." What do you think he did? Take a guess. Yeah, nothing. He just looked at me. He looked at me with disgust. Robin laughed, not even laughed. He just dismissed it. He did this thing when there's contempt, you can tell that people have contempt when they raise part of their lip, their upper lip. He did that. And he just looked at me and walked away. The next time, did it again. And this time he did the same thing and he scowled at me. The next time again and again and again. He never, ever told me anything that was being done well. However, he stopped doing it because I trained him to know that I'm going to put him in this uncomfortable space where he has to say this to me. Even if he says nothing, he's going to be uncomfortable. And so he stopped doing it. So here is a person, and by the way, him and my other boss had access to my husband's job. So they could have made life really bad for him and had him fired. So I had levels upon layers of, fear around if I stand up to him, what do I do? And I was the primary breadwinner. And so it's like, what do you do? So that happened. So let's talk about what doesn't work. What doesn't work is not asking questions. What doesn't work is just complaining and challenging and debating and disputing and accusing and all of these things with other people. Because what's happening is that your mind is constantly listening to your thoughts and to your voice. It's biofeedback. And so what happens is your mind hears that you're unhappy, and it creates more of that for you. It brings more of that to you. That's a problem. I'm not saying like just shove it deep inside and, and just don't ever deal with it. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying don't shove it down. Deal with it, but don't infect others with that toxicity, because that creates a whole other level of toxicity. The other thing is that, and I learned this the hard way because I coached one of my CEOs around one of their toxic board members. And he said, Carol, I had this tough conversation and it just went sideways. You told me to have this tough conversation. And I said, well, tell me about it. He said, well, he was walking in the hallway and I told him what I wanted to say, what we talked about. And I said, was he going somewhere? I mean, did you catch him on the way to somewhere else? And he said, well, yeah, but it's the only time that I could. Well, that's a problem, right? Because if timing isn't good and you catch him by the coffee maker or, it's just like a drive-by, that's not going to go well. We want the timing to go well. Idle chit chat is not good when for those types of things. Let's go outside of the environment where you usually are. Let's have coffee. Let's look at each other as human beings and remember to not fall into the trap of being defensive. And remember that this person in front of you doesn't have what you're dying for them to give you. They just don't have it. It's like asking me for a shirt and I'm shirtless. It's like, it doesn't, I probably should have used a different example. That's not great. Sorry, HR people. But, it's not something I can give you, right? So have compassion. The other thing is that your mind is constantly lying to you. We're incredible storytellers in our mind. And whenever something doesn't make sense or there's a gap in the story of our minds, we just make it up. And the problem is we don't know that we're doing that. So there are so many thought distortions where thoughts are lying to us. We think that we know what they're thinking, so we're mind reading. We're crystal ball gazing, thinking we know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know. All we have are facts. And if you think about this, we are given, think about the food for your brain that you're getting. We are given 144,000 negative messages on average by the time that we're 6 years old. 144,000. This is by our parents. This is by our teachers. This is by our friends, whoever and whatever. By the time we're 6, do you know how many positive messages we've gotten by then? Just take a guess. I know I can't give you too much time because I only have an hour, so sorry. If we were in person, I'd go stand by you. So watch out for that when I see you in person. But 5,000, 144,000, 5,000. Negative, positive. And we are having, on average, 60,000 thoughts a day. And think about how many of them are lying to us because our minds are storytellers. And so the negative emotions are rewiring our brain 1,000 times faster than the positive ones. Why? Because our brain is here to protect us. It's a primitive brain. It's still in the cave days. You all know that, right? That some people call it the reptilian brain, the primitive brain. Blah, blah. It's all there to protect us. So the assumptions, the judgments, all of those things that we tell ourselves about other people and the interaction between them, it's there to protect us when it's negative. Because back then, we didn't know if the noise was somebody that we could, or something that we could eat, or something that was going to eat us. And so we had to make a quick decision, a quick judgment, right? And that is still in place today. That's the problem. Because we are no longer threatened like that, but we're acting like we are. So I want you to think about all that, because there is a huge mind-body connection. Let's talk a little bit more about what we can do. Okay. So you always want to be in safety. You want to be in psychological safety. You want to be able to see well, have eye contact, read others' nonverbals, right? You want to be able to hear a wide range of frequencies, meaning a lot of different points of view, and be able to filter out your own background and experiences so that you can be a really powerful listener. This is all the stuff we want to do. What actually happens is that we all have dirty windshields. And all of this information is coming in through this dirty windshield. And all of our dirty windshields look different. And it's based on our icebergs. So the icebergs are generally our beliefs, our thoughts, our feelings, all the stuff that nobody can see. And what do they see? The 10%, the behavior. So they don't really know why we're behaving this way because they can't see everything going on underneath. But what they do want from us is to feel safe around us. They want us to trust them, to have dialogue with them, right? But we ourselves don't even know what's underneath our iceberg sometimes. So how do we want others to know? It's back to that conversation. So the other piece of it with the safety and the certainty is that many of you in this room, many of the people that you work with, they're addicted to certainty. I'm going to do this. I'm going to micromanage because I need to be certain that this is how it's going to go. Here's the challenge. The challenge is that our brain needs a little bit of uncertainty too. And when we're always trying to be safe in that certainty bubble, we end up acting out in micromanaging styles because our brain is having a war between certainty and uncertainty. And so if our uncertainty is low, our brain thinks that it's in danger. So, oh my God, we need to micromanage this. We need to figure this out. We need to control everything, right? I'm trying to get you underneath the brain of these people. This is what's going on inside. Okay. So apart from knowing that they don't have what you want, right? They can't give you what they don't have. Remember that if they're doing anything unkind, they are in pain. It's a cry for help. If you just tell them your plans and show them your results and tell them, all of these things are about you and you and you and you and you, it's going to go right over their head because what we really have to focus on is there underneath the iceberg. So maybe what you need to ask are some powerful questions. Like, how can I make your day better? What are you challenged with the most? What is it that gets in your way all the time? Now, the first time you ask these questions, they might bombard you with a whole bunch of stuff, right? You're like, oh my God, we need to shut this down because nobody asks them that. Everyone's afraid of them. So nobody asks, what the hell's going on with you, right? They're just subservient. So ask them, care, but be genuine. Because if you're not genuine, it's gonna be bad. We do not want that. You might have a poker face, but you don't have a poker body. So because 93% of what we say is nonverbal, if you don't feel it, it's going to come out. And then it's going to cause more problems for you and for them, really, right? The other thing that is counterintuitive, and I've been doing this for so long, and it just, for me, it comes naturally, but I know that when I'm talking to people and I say, well, what did you do? What are you doing about it? They never think of this. So I'm going to tell you one of the tricks. If you're infuriated with someone at work, instead of pushing them away, bring them closer. And I know what you're thinking, Carol. Oh my God, are you kidding me? It's exhausting. But here's what I'm going to tell you. Research upon research, and my experiences for the last almost 30 years in doing this, it has shown that avoidance is not the best strategy for dealing with these people. It's a relationship dance, and it's a science. And because we compartmentalize work and home relationships, we don't think of applying what we know about our closest relationships at home to the work. But in fact, I see a lot of parallels when people are struggling at work with people. They're also struggling in their marriage. They're struggling with their kids. There are a lot of parallels. So don't avoid confronting. It's just how you do it. So let me tell you how to do it. Lead with a compliment. It has to be genuine, but there's got to be something that you're grateful for in this person. There's got to be something. I'm dealing right now with a practice, a medical practice, and this doctor is toxic to the folks, right? And they're like, tell me, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Well, what are you grateful for in this person? Nothing. What about their ability to see the disease in a patient? What about all of the things that they can do so well? Oh, well, yeah, there's that. Right. So we tend to discredit the good when we're always looking for evidence of the bad. So I'm going to invite you to zoom out, challenge your thoughts, and start wondering, what are the redeeming qualities here? And start the conversation with that and make it real, make it genuine. The other thing is splitting the work. So in a lot of associations, and I've worked with several associations here. So in a lot of associations and organizations, we have work that is siloed. I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of relationship problems stem from system problems. If we don't have information flowing and communication going 2 levels up, 2 levels down, all the way across, we have a problem. And if we don't have systems to support the communication, we have a problem. So what I'm asking you here is to think about, can we cross-train people? Can we take certain things, and we're not taking them away. What we're doing is we're enlarging the circle of people that can do it so that we can help everybody with their load. Because part of what puts people in this space is that feeling of overwhelm. The other thing is that I'd like to invite you to start doing is focus on specific behaviors. So I learned that Molly, the intern, has been doing your weekly reports. Actually, it would never come out that way. It's more like, hey, I found out that Molly's doing your reports for you, right? That's a lot better, even with that tone, than what the behavior says about them. So labeling them. So you're so unprofessional because Molly's doing your reports, right? Or Molly's doing your reports. That's so unprofessional. You've labeled them. No labels. Let's focus on the 10% of the iceberg, not the 90% that you can't see, that you're trying to figure out what it is. What are the actual facts? What are the actual behaviors? I'm talking about videotapable behavior. Look at me doing this. Now you know how old I am. Videotapable. But, we're talking about things you can see. Otherwise, we're going to see a more destructive pattern. Right? But if you make that small change in how you communicate, you're going to see a lot more openness in these folks. And remember, I told you, try to get out of those four walls, try to get out of the usual environment. If you're constantly on Zoom, try to meet for coffee, try to do something different. And if you have to stay on Zoom because of location, take yourself to the backyard with your phone. I don't care, but be in a more relaxed environment when you're having these conversations. Now, when you're talking to a board or a director or somebody higher up, you could still do something like that, right? So instead of confronting them with like a micromanager, right? Instead of confronting them with like, hey man, you smother me. I can't get things done, right? Like, get off of me. You can say something like, right? We want to think of a compliment. We want to think of something they're doing well in relation to our experience. So, hey, I love the attention that you give to my work. It tells me how much you care about this association. It would help me a lot to get you what you need me to do if I can focus a little bit more, and if I can have either extra turnaround time, or if I can have more conversations with you around this, or if I can have whatever, right? But then you put it on yourself. It's not what you're doing. It's here's how I could really use your help. And it's only after you've given them that compliment. That's the key. Express appreciation. That's another thing. So I talked about finding one thing, that one piece of gratitude. Expressing I lost my thought. Appreciation for their authority. Just especially if you have a narcissist or somebody that's autocratic. You know what? Be genuine, but say, I really admire the way you treat patients. I really admire, that's for the doctors. I really admire the way that you treat members. I really admire the way you treat, or how much you focus on this or whatever. But I want you to start putting money in that emotional bank account so that when you want to say something that is a little bit more constructive and a little bit more in your mind, maybe conflict, that you have that emotional bank account for you to be able to do that. And then focus on what you can do. There are a lot of things that you can do. You want to know what the number one killer in this world is, and that is globally? It's stress. So I focus on the things that you can do. Manage your own stress. If we had more time, I'd go more into the mind-body connection and what we can do. But there are automatic processes that are happening in your body all the time. Learn to focus your attention on one thing, on the present. I have a client right now that is struggling with anxiety. And what I'm having her do, and she hasn't had another episode like the ones she's used to, is focus when you're about to get that, like, right? Focus on the present. Bring your mind even to your hand. What's happening? Where's the blood flow in your fingers? Start to really look at it. Feel right now I'm feeling the vibration in my hand, the heat in my hand. Bring yourself to the present moment. Look for 3 things that you might be able to touch in your environment, maybe things that you can hear, things that you can look at, but bring yourself to the present. And then stop your negative emotions. And I'm not saying don't feel them, but what I am saying is let's have a little bit more mental toughness. And what that is pause. You're feeling something. Pause. Think about the thought that was right before that emotion. Write it down, right? I'm upset. Like I'm really upset because I had to make dinner while I have to finish a project, right? It's that thought of everybody wants everything from me, right? Jot it down, and just jot it down the way it appears. You don't have to filter it. Then look at it on the paper. Now it's aside from you. It's a different thing. It's not part of you anymore. So now you can critique it, and you can say, that's a thought distortion. That is all or nothing thinking. That is mind reading, right? A million different thought distortions. And challenge your thoughts. Are you exaggerating? Are we looking for evidence to support that this person hasn't changed and they're trying to change? Is this just a minor setback? So those are the kinds of things that I invite you to think about And before I keep going, I just want to pause, given the time, to see if there are any questions that I maybe have. Oh, there is one. Is the best way to deal with a micromanager to give them some certainty? Yes. Sometimes you can't give it to them. So what I ask you to do, or what I invite you to do with a micromanager, is, for instance, a very practical thing that you can do, right? They don't know how to gain that control without being, right? So ask them, hey, would it be helpful if every day we huddled and I gave you a quick rundown of my priorities? Or ask them, what would be helpful to you so that you know what I'm working on, what's going on, and that you get what you want? Because what you want is important to me, Mr. Micromanager or Miss Micromanager. But ask them, because it might be different for everybody else. But yes, they're looking for that certainty. So how can we give it to them? Thank you for that question, Sharon. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to keep going. If you have questions, jump in. Okay, I just want to give you as much value as I can. But Peggy, you tell me when to stop, because I could keep going for days. Okay, the other thing is, you know that voice in your head? You know that voice, the voice that is constantly telling you, this sounds right, this doesn't sound right. Or when somebody's talking to you, you thought about, oh gosh, I left the laundry in the washing machine, I didn't put it in, right? They're talking to you, they're asking you questions, and all you can think about is whatever the voice inside your head decides to say at that moment. Some of you know it as your monkey mind, right? It just goes all over the place and has commentary on everything and everyone. Okay, so when you're in that state, that's when your mind has taken over. So acknowledge it. If you have to write things down, write them down and let them go. But acknowledge that everything you think is not always accurate. And if you were to believe, and please write this down, if you were to believe that the other person was conspiring for you, how would you shift the experience that you just had with them? How would you interpret it differently? Because let's be honest, when we think that people are against us or conspiring against us, they could say, oh, wow, that's a great shirt. And automatically you'll be like, hey, Lisa, did you just hear can you believe she just said what she just said, right? Because you interpret it like they meant something bad by it. And we honestly believe it. So pause, think about it, challenge your thoughts, and then move forward and stay present. Absorb yourself in the wonderful and the simple. And remember that this person is a human being and nobody is your puppeteer. And the way that we tend to make enemies at work and keep them enemies is by getting together with more people and talking about it and talking about how horrible it is and how horrible it is. And then we create these silos and these negative cohorts. And here's the challenge, and I'm going to leave you with this. The challenge with these negative cohorts and this biofeedback is that failure increases loyalty. So, you know, those cults that think about, that the end of the world is coming and I don't know what, right? Well, on a certain date, and then it doesn't happen. You would think that they'd be like, oh, this is BS. I'm out of here. No, they actually band together closer. And the reason we do that is because we become more loyal to each other when we're negative thinking together. So there's a loyalty there. So even though it's crazy, we're loyal and we won't leave that negative group. The other piece of it is the sunk cost. Many of you know what the sunk cost is, right? So this fallacy is we've invested so much time and emotion. And emotion is really just energy in motion. It's your energy, right? So you've invested so much emotion and so much time in being an enemy with this person or having them as an enemy that our brain refuses to believe that we've invested so much in something that doesn't exist or for nothing. So we will not give in, even if that person tries to change. No, we've invested too much time and effort in you being a micromanager. We're not gonna let you change. And then the last piece is that when you have hardships with people that you work with, what happens there is that the complaining, not only does it increase the loyalty, but it also increases the stories that you tell yourself, because everything that that person does is evidence to support that belief, no matter what they do, if it's good, bad, or indifferent. So just ask yourself, am I planting seeds or weeds? And if that person is planting weeds, then we've got to pour some love in there. We've got to pour some love into their cup. We've got to pour some positivity in there, right? Tell them that you acknowledge them for the things that they do well. Get them to lower those insecurities and those barriers. Okay, and with that, I better stop. All right.
Carol, thank you. That was absolutely awesome. I appreciate the fact that you were able to identify all these different things and then give us solutions for them as well. So that was really helpful. I think maybe people were so shy because they didn't want to air their dirty laundry in front of each other. So please bear in mind, everybody, this is a shameless plug for Carol, but she does have a business where she helps people deal with difficult leadership. So you can find her online if this is something that you have a personal issue with, of course. And then also she's going to be one of our speakers at the A.E. Gadd Institute in 2 weeks. And she'll be talking about team building during the pandemic and working remotely and building your teams. So it'll be a slightly different message, but yay, because she's awesome and she can help us all at a time when we need help. So Carol, thank you again. Thank you for everyone who attended. We do have this recorded, or we will have it recorded, and so I'll send that in the follow-up to everybody. I think it's definitely something that I even want to see again, because there's so much information. So Carol, thanks again, and thanks everybody for your time. And we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Can't wait to see everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the week, everyone. Bye. Thank you,
Carol.